We'll just wait a couple minutes as people filter in still. You tell me when to go then. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stepping Forward Together, a special Zoom event dedicated to clubfoot parents, orthotists, and experts in the field. My name is Jeff Dasso. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at MD Orthopedics. Joining me today are esteemed professionals, Ksenia Major, a board-certified orthotist and clinical director at Boston O&P, Shannon O'Shea, an ABC certified prosthetist orthotist at Hanger Clinic. And with me is Maureen Hoff, MD Orthopedics parent advocate, the author of Clubfoot Chronicles, and a clubfoot mother herself. Thank you, everyone, for being on. During this event, we will address the questions that you, the parents, have submitted to us. Our panel of experts is here to share their knowledge, experiences, and expertise in the clubfoot treatment and care. Towards the end of the session, we will open the floor to a few additional questions. We encourage you to take full advantage of this unique opportunity to connect with professionals and fellow parents in the clubfoot community. Following the event, we kindly request your participation in a brief survey to gather your feedback. As a token of our appreciation for attending, all participants will receive a free pair of Mitchell Ponseti AFO socks. Stepping Forward Together is a collaborative platform where we come together to learn, support one another, and ensure the best possible outcomes for our children with clubfoot. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we look forward to an informative and inspiring event. Let's begin. Additionally, I want to thank Justin Fletcher, who is our marketing manager behind the camera. So all this wouldn't be possible without him. So the first question I have for Shannon, well, Shannon will start, is why are boots and bar the preferred option for treatment? Shannon, take it away.
Well, thank you, Justin, and thank you for asking me to be a part of this amazing opportunity to chat with clubfoot families. So yes, back to the question of why boots and bars are preferred treatment options for clubfoot is unfortunately, clubfoot is a deformity that affects multiple planes of motion. So to correctly align the foot and ankle complex, we do have to cross the ankle joint as well as control the motion at the knee and the hips with the bar. So many families ask, why not just the boot section? Well, it does not work because multiple planes of motions are actually affected in this deformity. So to provide your cutie with the most success in treatment, we need boots and bars for the first 4 to 5 years of their lives.
Ksenia, you can answer as well.
Ksenia, did you have anything to add at all to that?
Not for the preferred treatment. We know boots and bars is probably the most widely used system in the US for clubfoot treatment. I know we do get asked that there are other systems available for unilateral clubfoot, which is a fancy term for when only one side is affected. A lot of times this depends on the prescribing physician as to if they're going to prescribe a different brace, but very similar to a boot and some sort of mechanism to address that three-plane motion of clubfoot. Yeah.
Perfect. I do want to add before this next question, if anyone out there has additional questions, if we have time remaining, we will address those questions. So please feel free in the chat box to ask any of those. And then, like I said, if we have time at the towards the end of the event, we'll get to them. The next question is, what should parents expect for the 3 months of full-time wear? Any tips and tricks? Ksenia, let's kick it off with you, and then Shannon, you can follow up.
Sounds great. Sorry, Jeff, I was ready for this one.
All
So
good.
with those first 3 months, definitely expect, some redness, some tears, but remember to have grace with yourselves. Those initial days could be long, but that's what we're here for. We're your support team in between all of those visits with the other physicians. And adjustment appointments are always available. So just be sure to look out for any skin texture changes, any blistering, any shearing, any redness lasting longer than 30 minutes is usually our go-to sign of, hey, reach out to your clinician. We're almost always available via email or phone. Shannon, any other tips? Yeah.
Yes, same, in agreement with that. Those first 3 months are the hardest and most challenging. So like Ksenia said, it's got to give yourself some grace. Know that your cutie will adapt. We are not throwing boots and bar on you as the parents. We are throwing boots and bars on your cutie. And they are really malleable and adapt well to change. Just to add to that 30 minutes of redness, I always tell my families, if there's any texture change of the skin, that's when we also want to be notified. So never should you see blisters. We really want to be ahead of the blister game. So if it is lasting longer than 30 minutes and also changing the texture of the skin, that's when you should really reach out to your orthotist and let them know, hey, I see this. Is it something that we can fix at home, or is it something that we need to come in to have a follow-up? And again, communication is key in those first 3 months. If something's not working, just communicate back to your orthotist or provider.
Thank you both. We'll kick it to Maureen Hoff for the next question.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I think from a parent's perspective, for what to expect, I think it's important to remember as a parent that you're also learning. So it's a learning curve, not just for your cutie, but for you. So give yourself grace, give everybody time to adjust. It's not just about your cutie's tolerance and adjustment. It's also like, let's be frank, you guys are learning how to put on a medical device that you have very limited, probably no experience with. So I think it's just really important that to kind of mirror what Shannon and Ksenia said, like, you're not in it by yourself. You have a medical team, and if you have questions, then you should definitely go to them. If I've learned nothing from working with so many people in the field, it's that they really do want you to be successful and to feel confident. So if you run into issues, don't be afraid to talk to somebody about it. Getting ahead of that is always so important. So I just wanted to throw that little thing in there before we get there. And then this one is kind of another one about 23-hour. So the 23-hour wear always seems to be one of those things that parents really think about and kind of have concerns about. So this mom wrote in, I haven't had my cutie yet, but should 23-hour wear and the tolerance be their biggest concern? What do you think, Ksenia?
I'd say we always say we'd be totally lying if that wear schedule did not sound overwhelming, especially that you haven't even met the little one yet. But many kids start out in a Ponseti cast, which is not removable. So kind of the upside or pro of moving to a boot and bar is you can at least remove them for bathing. Skin checks are a lot easier. But since babies are growing so rapidly at all hours of the day, it's really important to adhere to that 23/7 hour wear schedule. Regression can happen super quickly, and no one wants to be back in those casts again.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon, anything to add?
Yeah, just the structure of the foot itself. The bones are being pulled by musculature and ligaments and tendons, and all of these things allow the bone to change shape. But if it's not in the right alignment or position, then that regression factor really increases. So it's very important to adhere to that prescribed wearing schedule of 23 hours out of the day to hopefully maximize the opportunity of keeping that deformity from coming back in the future. So again, it sounds daunting, but no, you came from a cast prior, you get an hour of break, which is great. Kiss those feet when they come out of the boots and bars, and really, look at them, and that's a great way to just show that you're doing a really good job, as you can physically start to see those alignment changes and hopefully reduce your risk of regression.
I guess I would also ask, how do you know, like, I think parents get concerned about the tolerance aspect. Like, how do you know that your baby's really not tolerating it or just being a baby, right? Like, because when they go into boots and bar 23 hour, they're usually between 2 to 3 months old. And I think parents really get concerned about, like, how am I supposed to know if this is an issue that they're really not tolerating, or if there's just an adjustment period? Do you tell parents there's like a certain time frame, like 2 to 3 weeks, or what can they kind of expect as far as that tolerance aspect goes?
Yeah, for me, it's a week. If it's
Mm.
constant tears and you are, losing sleep over this entire process, you need to come in and see us again, or even reach out to your provider at that point, because could be something potentially going on. But a week's time frame is kind of our go-to. That's kind of our standard protocol. If it's just not working, then let's try to figure out a way to increase the tolerance so that everyone can get some sleep. And again, our goals are aligned. We want to help you. We just need to know if you're having issues and concerns. So that's kind of our protocol.
Awesome.
Exactly similar is that 1 week. Yeah. And, even touching base in between during that week-long timeline, just to make sure. Feel free to send photos. Those are always helpful. And we can kind of assess, is this something we need to get you in tomorrow? Or can we try it again for another few days and then touch base? Those, the 23/7 is not forever, which is something to look forward to. There is light at the end of that tunnel, but it's hard.
It can feel like forever, but it's not forever. I think it's important for parents to know that it feels like 3 months seems like a really long time, but when you're on the other end of it, you look back and you're like, that actually was just a really small blip in the window. But not to discount how difficult that transition can be for some families. So kind of on that same vein, this next question is about, what are some different positions for the adult to be in when they're putting on the boots and bar? Like, as we talk about with parents who don't have any experience doing this, sometimes we worry about, are we putting it on in the right fashion? Do you guys have like different suggestions for that when you talk to your parents? What do you think, Shannon?
Yes, I love that question, because as a provider of the boots and bars, I'm always sitting in front. And I think that is the most optimal position for you as the parent, because that gives you a really good visual of that heel getting down into the boot itself, and making sure that you're trying to properly align that foot and ankle into the boot. Now, there's going to be challenges as they start to become an alligator. They're no longer a pumpkin, and now you're wrestling an alligator getting the boots and bars on. So sometimes it takes a team effort where, okay, parent 1 is over here distracting kiddo, parent 2 is down at the feet and getting that boot and bar on. So just really, again, if you can be in front of them, that is the best place to be, so that you can just really make sure that that heel is getting dropped down into the boot as best as possible.
Yeah, with that, we say there's so many options and none of them wrong, as long as that heel is getting down in there nice and snugly. Being able to put them in a relaxed position where the knee can flex all the way or bend really helps that heel just pop right into the back of that boot. And also remember, those boots can be put on without being attached to the bar.
Mhm.
So sometimes when these get fit, outside of one of our offices, parents don't realize that that boot can clip off of the bar. And it's a
Mhm.
whole lot easier putting that boot on by itself, unattached to the bar.
Mhm. Yeah. I think for us as parents, we had the most success, especially when we were in that learning curve aspect where it was like we almost just double teamed. It was like we were both in front, but I took one foot, my husband took the other foot, and we just tried to get the boots on as quickly and efficiently as possible. And then we had the older siblings being kind of the distractors, which helped. And then as they got older, the reality was we kind of maintained a very similar routine throughout her entire time of bracing. So we would always have her where she was, where we were sitting below her feet, because that just was the optimal point. But when she was a baby, we weren't on the floor. We were on a bed because it was more comfortable. And then we eventually moved to the floor when she got older. Because there was more space. The bigger they get, the more space you need to be able to maneuver all of the different parts. So I think it's a great question. And it's these questions that parents don't think about during the appointments, right? They're like, we're thinking about all the medical logistical stuff of that, but not really what we're going to face at home. So I think that's what's so valuable about this, is giving parents information about things that they don't necessarily ask during the appointments when they're with you guys.
Awesome. Very good. Our next question here, the boots always slip off during the night. If I tighten them more, they hurt her. Suggestions. Shannon, let's start with you. And I actually am going to also add on this, and just if you can talk a little bit about the strap stretching and what you two do during that strap stretching part, because we know they do stretch, and what you tell parents to look out for there.
Sure, absolutely. So back to the first question on that heel slipping up out of the boot. You know, focus on it, get that heel down as low as you can, but don't let it stress you out. Especially at the beginning, sometimes there's some tightness left over after the casting that it's not yet settled down into that boot. And so you do have to kind of allow that boot to kind of pull them down into it. Now, ideally, your orthotist or your provider of your boot and bar are giving you a tension mark on your straps. So you do want to try to maintain a good proper tension. And I tell you, like, you should probably see the whites of your knuckles as you're pulling that leather strap over. Like, it does need to be tight. And unfortunately, you're most likely, especially at the beginning, going to hear this audible resistance from your cutie to say, I don't like that. But again, remember that little pudgy cutie foot is going to mold into something. It's just going to take time too. So there's options as far as whether we crisscross the straps, which I'm sure we'll have that question come up, but or just making sure that we're trying to get that tension dialed in. And it's an easy call to us to say, hey, it's constantly popping up. Do I need to come in and make an appointment and see you to make sure that we have the proper tension? And then to Jeff's kind of comment of the leather, it's going to stretch. It absolutely will stretch. Our oils in our hands just absorb into that leather. And so it starts to mold further. And so that tension will not stay the same throughout the length of the time that you're in the pair of boots that you're sent home with. So sometimes you actually go past that tension that we're providing you initially because the leather does stretch out. But when that boot comes off, you should always see some redness. That is good. But as long as that redness is fading away in that 30-minute time frame, that's how we know that the foot and ankle is properly aligned in that boot and bar. So that's kind of our go-to. Ksenia, anything that you want to add there?
Yeah, I'll say, since you've mentioned the tension, sometimes if it's a continuation of them slipping off through the night and say they're older than 6 months, sometimes that's our go-to to pull in the orthopedic team as well. And if they've been in a straight Ponseti bar, that's when we maybe look to having an articulated bar, like the Move bar.
Yeah.
Much of this is directed by the physician, so be sure to loop them in as well, and your orthotist will be sure to, work with them. There are, several different adjustment options through padding and saddles and pieces in the heel. And there's also different boots available, again, that may be a good fit. So again, back to the same thing, don't hesitate to reach out. We have options.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice because there are a lot of options out there, and certainly you both answered that brilliantly. But even MD Orthopedics makes some of those options. I know that there's some other things that you can do that orthotists will do to the products to sort of prevent that from slipping out. Well, Maureen, you're up for the next question.
And I think the reality is that every cutie is different. Every foot is different. And so while there is kind of different options for the boots, there are all these adjustments that can be made in order to accommodate skin issues, things like that. So that's why it's really important to just speak with somebody if you have questions. I know as a parent that can be really difficult, especially if you're new to kind of interacting in the medical world. It takes a little bit of practice to be able to go like, okay, when do I talk? When do I ask questions and when don't I? But if it's something that's really about the foot, about a medically related question, that's something that you really should be going to and working with your medical team on. And especially if it has something to do with the boot fitting, right? If you're looking for like product recommendations, like what are great jammies, stuff like that, that's stuff that you can ask other parents about. But these like fit issues should really be things that you work with a medical team on. So in that vein, is it okay if the tongue, so the tongue, I think in this question is reference to that middle piece, that large kind of circular piece, pops out of the top or the bottom of the buckles? Like we all kind of know it's a little bit difficult to figure out how that should be placed, especially because sometimes the tongue can be a little bit, have extra material. So what do you guys suggest to parents? And we'll start with you, Ksenia, this time.
Yeah, sure. So that tongue can totally overlap or pop out at the bottom of the buckles, as long as you're not seeing additional skin redness or breakdown.
Okay.
Oftentimes we'll cut the tongue, so kind of in this circular shape. So it just makes the edges a little smaller so it can tuck in. This one is uncut. Other ones, and again, sometimes it's dependent on the physician or the physical therapist, will completely remove the tongue and only use the silicone saddle pad.
Okay.
So then that's placed in there. Yep. Shannon, do you have anything?
Yeah, so we do the exact same thing. And so again, once this tongue starts to really absorb some of the oils from your own hands and the baby's kind of perspiration through that sock, it will start to mold to that area. So sometimes it's the, little hole being above that strap where we ideally would like it, but sometimes it's below it. But if it's molded to that and securing that heel down, it's an A-okay thing.
Awesome.
Maureen, did you find anything with the tongue that you found helpful with your kiddo? Or anything consistently that you guys did when you sized up to a new pair of boots?
Yeah, I think it was always, we tried to make sure that it would fit. We kind of like tucked it in between the black plastic and the actual like silicone lining. And that was kind of how we knew it was a good fit. We tried to ensure that there wasn't any bunching at all, because that can be easier said than done, especially when the boot gets bigger. Because as the boots get bigger and your child's foot gets bigger, there's a bigger, at least we found, discrepancy in the sizes. So when you're jumping from like a 3 to a 4, just making sure that there wasn't bunching in not only the tongue, but also the sock below, which we'll talk about. But sometimes that extra fabric in there can cause skin issues if it's bunched up. So we always just tried to make sure it was a good fit across there. And we always made sure that we did that buckle first. Like the middle strap was always the strap that we did first. And it was always the tightest. And that was, so that we ensured that was in a good spot before we moved on to the other buckles.
All right. Well, to piggyback on all of that conversation, it's a pretty relevant question, is to wear the pressure saddle or not. And so I even will take this a step further. And I know that there are plenty of orthotists or orthopedic surgeons that will actually cut our tongue out completely and just use the saddle. So Shannon, what are you doing in your clinic, and what do you recommend?
Yeah, definitely it's physician driven. And then if we are having issues with sliding up, it's something that we can adjust in those follow-up appointments. But the coefficient of friction with those silicone pressure saddles is a little bit higher. So you're getting a better grip onto that dorsum or top surface of the foot. So it is somewhat a good option if we are having that sliding issue and that heel's just not wanting to sit down, but something that your provider or your orthotist can provide for you if we are having those challenges.
That's great. I'd say very similar in our clinic. Again, just depends on the physician. And we have some that'll say, hey, just leave the tongue the way it is. And then if they're having problems down the road, then move towards, the adjustments of the tongue, either adding padding or the saddle pad or removal of the tongue, or use the tongue with a saddle pad. So we've seen it all. And again,
Yeah,
just making
of
sure
course.
you're doing that middle strap first is the key component of that.
Definitely. Awesome.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on that with the saddle, it's also the greatest part about the saddle is that you can put it on and take it off as needed. So sometimes you'll need the saddle, sometimes you won't, so it's something that you can add and adjust as needed. There were times where we used it, and then there were times where there was too much bulk for her. And so it was a great tool and accessory to use when needed, but also something that was easily taken away. So I think that's the best part about the saddle from my perspective. This next question is about crisscrossing the straps or not. And so I think I see a lot of this come up within the parent community for clubfoot parents, is like, we're trying to get the heel to stay in place. And do you recommend that we crisscross the straps as a way to ensure that the foot is in the correct position in the boot? So we'll start with Ksenia, I think,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'm happy to
All
start
right.
on this one. It's not something we actually ever do in clinic or have somebody leave the clinic with the straps crisscrossed at an initial fit. However, it's something we are okay with, if we see them back on a follow-up and it's working. So the main, I think, goal of crisscrossing the strips is to help keep that heel down. And if parents are having issues of migration or having that heel continuing to slip out, and they found that the crisscrossing straps are working and there's not extra redness or skin breakdown on the top of the foot, we're okay with it. But then that leads to, again, if they're a little bit older and they're still in that straight Ponseti bar, this is also another key indicator. Hey, maybe it's time to move to the articulating bar.
Okay.
I'm
Shannon,
in
how about you
complete
guys?
agreement. Yeah, complete agreement as well. I was going to chime in. This might be an opportunity to move into a move style bar. But it's always, really a collaboration effort between that physician and your provider and you at home, because you guys are taking the bulk of the treatment. And so if you are seeing some challenges, you have that parental gut feeling that something's wrong and it's just not working, like that could be something that we do. But I will use caution in crisscrossing the straps, because again, tension is key. And sometimes you don't have the proper amount of holes on the straps if you are to crisscross it. So that's where, we come in, and I brought my little handy dandy hole puncher. Like we can add holes, we can, do some other things, provide length in that strap, but it's really important to have tension in those straps, because that's the only way we're going to control that foot from wanting to pop up. So again, we never start there. We're always starting with middle strap first, top strap and bottom strap. But if it's something that can help secure that heel down, then we'll move to that.
Awesome.
That's great. I just want to tell everyone at home, when you hear them referring to the Move Bar, MD Orthopedics just launched a new product about 30 days ago called the Move Bar, officially in the US, Canada, and parts of Latin America. And it's really our rendition and our version of a dynamic bar where you've got the articulating arm. So I just wanted to make sure the audience knew what they were referring to when they said the Move Bar. Okay, so changing topics a little bit from our straps and pressure saddles and crisscrossing the straps. This is a question we hear all the time, and we certainly have a recommendation for it on the manufacturer side, but it's great to hear it from the orthotists here, and then even Maureen, is how do you know when to change the sizes? And Shannon, we'll start with you on when you know to up the size of your AFO.
Yeah, we always have a rule of thumb. No pun intended, I guess it's the foot, whatever. But hang 10 is what we say. So if all 10 toes are just dangling over that edge, it's most likely time to move forward into the next size. But again, where regression starts is at the heel. So if the heel is still loose, even though we have hanging toes over the edge, we're probably going to keep you in that until our provider tells us with a prescription that we're going to move up in sizes. There is a question coming in on the chat feature that asks, my son's been in it for a period of time. When do I know? Well, again, kind of those telltale signs is when that foot outreaches the edge of the boot, but also if the heel is getting too snug down into the boot as well. So those are kind of our two major things that we're looking at. And then I can't remember if this is coming up, but also like bar width, you were also checking that as we're sizing up in the boots, is also maintaining the proper width of the bar too, because that's very, very important.
Yeah, I loved your reference, Shannon, on the hang 10, and we've definitely been using that from now on. But to go on the shoulder width, just remember as your kiddo weans into nighttime only wear and you're coming to maybe switch out the boot sizes, to bring that bar with you, so that we can make sure we can just widen the bar while you're in the office. Which when we got this question, it made me think, Maureen, for people that are buying boots kind of privately or at home, how are they monitoring that shoulder width? Or is that clear in the instructions? Or just love to know what, parents are doing when not followed by the healthcare team so closely.
Yeah, I think as she got older, it was one of those things where we would purchase the boot months in advance, like the next size up, so that we could have an easy reference of when we thought maybe it was time to change sizes in the AFOs. I think that's a question that parents need to ask their medical team when they meet. Like, is that something that they're supposed to alert on? Is that something that's going to be checked up during follow-ups? Like, what is the process for when I need to get new boots? Because I think it's different depending on so many different variables, right? Your medical team, your insurance, coverage of the boots, all of that, whether you travel for care, all of it is really important in that aspect. I think as far as the bar length went, that's one of the, I think I don't know if we lucked out because our cutie is just small, but we didn't really adjust outside on our own. It was something that we would bring the boots and the bar in for whatever follow-up appointment we had, and then they would adjust then. But there is a lot of questions in the community about how wide the bar should be. So the way that we always went was just, I would hold it up to her back, and then it would be from the outside of her shoulders is where kind of that middle screw of the bar would be.
The middle screw of the bar.
Yeah, like the middle screw in the actual, like, clips of the bar, whatever that looks like on the outside, not on the edges, because there is some confusion there. I don't know if that's what you guys do. Like, what do you guys tell people? Like, when do they need to know? What are you telling parents about when they should adjust sizes of the bar length? I don't think that's a question on here, so we might as well throw it in.
Again, we do that at the follow-ups, usually, and even if it's an adjustment appointment, not related to sizing up in the boots, we just go ahead and double check everything, make sure the screws aren't loose anywhere in the bar, and then address the shoulder width, because there can be growth in between that time of sizing up boots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every provider is different in our office. So for us, we have a little cheat sheet on the physician's preference on what screw aligns with the shoulder width. And so again, as you mentioned, Maureen, like, it's really a question to ask your entire medical team. Myself, I'm an orthotist, but I really go off of that physician's order. So if you're seeing one physician and that's their protocol, that's what I'm going to follow. And everyone has their preference, but making sure that it is wide is really important to control those 3 panes of motion rather than too narrow. So that is kind of a little tip as well.
Awesome. This next question is kind of back down to the heel part. All right. The reality is parents have so many questions about how far and heel placement and how much of the heel should be seen. And especially during that first transition, because the baby's non-weight bearing. And so there's a lot of information out there about what should happen regarding the heel. So this is one of the questions that kind of came in about it. And it was, we're 1 month in, her heel still won't stay down all the way, but her doctor says it's okay. Is it? What do you think? Shannon, I'm going to start with you this time.
Yeah, again, communicating back with your concerns if that heel is not going all the way down. But also in most cuties, treatment protocol is also to stretch the foot and ankle. So it's not just the boots and bars job to properly align the foot, it's also stretching out the musculature. So making sure that you are touching and feeling that foot before you are placing it into the boot is really a good idea. Same thing goes as like if you're going to go out for a run and you need to stretch before going out for a run so your muscles are in the right position to maintain a certain position inside that boot. So it's okay, but is it because tightness is coming up? And that's what you want to be aware of. If it's constantly staying up in that position where it's outside of that boot, then maybe there's a tightness factor that needs to be addressed from a physician's standpoint versus you trying to get that heel all the way down. But again, components of clubfoot treatment are boots and bars, and also making sure that we're stretching and exercising outside of that boot and bar once the physicians allow that to happen. So stretching is key, getting the foot in the best alignment, especially if we go back to that question of what position you should be in. really getting in front of your cutie, making sure you're properly getting that foot stretched out to then place it into. Another thing is just like putting on the boot in the proper fashion. When you are positioning the foot, you want to try to get it at that 90-degree angle. And unlike a shoe where we dip the toe down into a shoe, you always want to bring the heel back into the boot. And that's going to help to maintain that stretch that you're putting on your clubfoot cutie's foot, so that they're, you know, putting it on in the right position.
Yeah, that was great. And again, just to be reassured, the whole healthcare team is looking through those little windows in the back of the heel to note the progress, you know, and how far it's stretching down, or if it's not stretching down and maybe we need to try something else. The other thing we say too is don't be afraid to re-don the boot or retry again. You know, this is a moving target with your babies. The younger they are, sometimes the trickier it can be. So just start again, reflex that knee, bend it, and try and get them back down in there while doing the middle strap first.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I think it's important to remember that practice helps, right? It's what seems like it's going to take you 15-20 minutes to get the boots on when you are first transitioning into that 23-hour wear will take you 2 minutes when your child is 3.5. So the practicing that donning and doffing never really, it doesn't hurt. It only adds to the longevity of the treatment. So I think that's such a great point. What do you think, Jeff?
Kicking it to me. No, that's great. You know, being on the MD orthopedic side and helping develop some of these products and working with providers all over the country, but all over the world, the one thing that always comes up over and over again, and it seems like the most simple thing, is what do you look for in an ideal sock? And in particular, we're in Houston, Texas right now, and it's 110 degrees outside. So in your warm environments and your cold environments, what do you two recommend as far as the sock wear for the children?
I think we have a few consistent things that we look for, and that's a snug fit, that it's thin, it's not providing any wrinkles once you're tightening down those straps, and that it's breathable. Jeff, am I allowed to name brands?
Brands, absolutely.
Okay. We of course have the MD orthopedic socks, but also we've seen everything from Target's Cat and Jack, Bombas, and the key is making sure they're staying up and not rolling down, because that can be an issue as well. Because again, your cutie is moving; it's not a static, staying still object. As far as climate, you know, we want to make sure that the socks are staying dry, so we're preventing any blisters. So in those warmer climates like Houston, you might need to change the socks a little more frequently. That perspiration can build up pretty quickly. The braces are hot. Plastic is hot, and the leather on top of it. So
yeah,
keeping a good eye on that. I think wrinkled and pruny toes equals soft skin, and that softened skin is oftentimes what can lead to that blistering or skin breakdown.
I completely agree. The thinner socks, the better. There also is another brand made by Knit Right, and most orthotists are likely going to provide that type of sock, but it is something that's made thin. It's also seamless as well. Not saying that you need to always get a seamless sock, but it is preferred because that lessens the bulk around the ankle joint itself. Really helps to make sure that the leather strap or the tongue or the pressure saddle really just sits into that top part of the foot to really secure that foot down into the boot. But thin is best. And if your child happens to have a super sweaty foot, changing out that sock halfway through the day, and that way you have a dry, clean sock that's going to keep that skin well protected. That skin is so sensitive those first few months of life, so just keeping everything dry. And if you need to change out the sock, you change out the sock. I always tell families, like, remember those little girls' dress socks with the little ruffles at the top? Those are the types of socks you want to look for. Is thin, thin, thin is best. Everyone thinks thicker is better. Not at all. You're adding bulk. You don't get to hold on to that foot and ankle the thicker the sock is. So thin is best.
You know, I don't know if what you two think about this, but I've even heard of people cutting off the toes of socks. Have you heard any of your families doing that?
Yeah, just so long as it's not reflecting back and curling back into that bottom strap. So as long as you can maintain that, whether you're reflecting it over the bottom edge of the boot itself, just to help secure it down. What you don't want is just an extra, seam or
Sure,
layer that could cause a blister.
And to go on your ruffles, you could totally wear ruffled socks. Just make sure they come up
Absolutely.
higher than that top strap. So we've got several in those
Yeah.
socks.
No, that's great. And my only other thought too is I know that there's parents out there that'll actually fold the sock up over the AFO. Maureen, I know you did that with your cutie. Why did you do that?
I think because the sock is so long. A lot of the socks that you get, and a key for us was to make sure that the heel and the foot was where there were no issues. And what I mean by that is, like, wherever the straps were crossing, I wanted to ensure that was a tight fit for the sock. So if there was extra fabric or the sock was a little bit too long, because, like, let's be real, like, these feet are really small when they start. And so whatever size sock you get, there's going to be it's going to be larger than what your child's foot is at some point. And so for us, if there was any extra fabric, we'd kind of pull it from the toes out just to make sure there wasn't any excess fabric that was bunching within any point of contact with the boot. And then we would roll it over the top. And that was kind of twofold. One, because it kind of covered that top strap, so she had less access to that top strap. And it just kind of got rid of the excess, especially when it was going like right across her. A lot of the time it was right below her knee, and that can cause some like red marks below the knee, right? Because there's some tightness there. So we would just pull it over the top, and that never seemed to cause any issues for us. So
Awesome. Thank you.
yeah. And I think just to add on for socks, I think it's you got to try, you might have to try a few. You might have to kiss a few frogs before you find what is the right fit for your cutie, because everybody is different. Like, I have so many clubfoot mom friends who used all different types of socks, and it takes a little bit of time to figure out what is the right combination for your child's skin, the bulkness factor, the climate, all of that. And it changes as your child wears too, right? In 23-hour wear, that you might be changing the sock more frequently in warmer climates. And then as the child's only wearing them at night, you may be okay with just one pair during that nighttime. So it's also just always kind of an adjustment phase as well.
That's
So
great, Maureen. I was
yeah.
just gonna say, like, we love to hear from parents too when they've found a brand that works for them, because then we can just add it to our toolbox to let other
Yeah.
parents know, hey, so-and-so reached out and they love this sock. And so you can help another kid.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think so many parents, that's a question that I see all the time on social media groups, like, what sock should we use? And so I think that's why I always tell people there's a wide variety out there. And so finding the right fit, and again, just kind of like the pressure saddles, you might need to adjust based on what's happening with your cutie during different points of their treatment. Maybe during the summer, you're using a thinner sock. Maybe during the winter, it's okay to use a thicker sock. So it just depends on what's happening for your child as well. So kind of on that vein, how do I prevent blisters or pressure sores from forming in the first place? So I'm going to just preface this before you guys say, I like to admit readily that I was trying really hard to do the right thing for my cutie when she moved into 23-hour wear. And I thought I was going to be helping alleviate any sort of blisters or sores from forming by adding a bunch of stuff to the boot prior to her wearing them and without the medical team's knowledge. Like, I was trying to do the right thing. And I think parents are doing something, they have a lot of questions about this because they want to prevent issues. But in the end, it backfired for us because it added too much bulk. So what do you recommend to parents to just even try to prevent any skin issues from happening?
I'll
You wanna
start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, I'll start. I think first you gotta check the skin frequently. That's number one. So even though you're in 23 hours of wearing at the beginning, you still have that 1 hour out that you can break up throughout your day to get everything accomplished from a bathing standpoint, but also to do your stretches and exercises, checking that skin for any sorts of texture changes or redness that is persistent. So frequent skin checks is very, very important to do, especially during that first week of 23 hours a day wearing schedule. Back to the sock, just making sure that that sock is as smooth throughout that boot so that we don't add pressure, as Maureen just said. If it's got a wrinkle, that's extra pressure in there. And then cleaning your boots every so often too, as you are dealing with an infant that could have a lovely diaper blowout and then you have things in your boot. It's important to clean the boot. So just a little clean cloth and rubbing alcohol, wipe it down, and just making sure that there's no extra potential gunk that could cause a skin issue as well. And then my biggest thing that I tell families is the first thing you're always going to want to do is moisturize that skin after they're likely coming out of a serial cast. Do not over moisturize their skin. Keep that skin dry. It does not need extra moisture. Rough and tough skin actually helps to hold and secure that boot on. So if you're over moisturizing it, now you got this soft skin, it tends not to like that pressure. And then unfortunately you end up with a potential, skin irritation or blister. So again, for me, kind of just keeping that skin dry, keeping it clean, and keeping an eye on it, and making sure that everything is looking good.
Yeah, absolutely everything the same. And reaching out to us, like I said, sooner rather than later, if you're starting to notice a change or any redness, no question or photo is silly. A lot of times we can jump on it, see where the issue is, and get an adjustment going. We've got lots of different tips and tricks with those pads here in the lab. Sometimes what happens is we do too much at one time, or so we always suggest trying one adjustment, maybe try it out, see if that worked. And if it didn't, try something else. Sometimes that first pad doesn't do the trick and we've got to try it in a different area or a different material, different thickness. So like I said, just reach out. We're here for you in between time, with lots of different tricks.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a great suggestion. Is obviously I'm guilty of adding so many things at once. And I think parents have really good intentions, but it's also if you're running into an issue or you want to try something out, that's even preventative, maybe talk to your team before you do that, before you add stuff, even if you think it's a good idea, because sometimes it's just too much. And so that one piece at a time is a really great suggestion.
This is another great question, and it's a little bit away from any devices or the AFO or socks or bars and all the kind of device related questions. This is really almost like a life milestone question. Is anything to look out for when potty training with boots and bar? And I forget who went first. I think it's do you remember Ksenia's turn? I think it is. But then we'll let Maureen also answer this just because of her experiences. So Ksenia, do you have any thoughts behind the potty training of a child?
I really defer to Maureen on this one. She has the most real life experience, so I think we all want to hear it straight from the source.
All right, let's go right to Maureen then.
Okay, so it's really funny because I actually did a podcast episode just about potty training in Boots and Bar, because this question comes up a lot. It's something that you don't think about when your baby is 3 months old, but you get to that 2.5 to 3-year-old stage, and a lot of the potty training advice out there has to do with nighttime. And I think that's really where the parents start to come in with questions of like, but they said they shouldn't be wearing anything at night, but then they can't get up and go to the bathroom independently. And that's a reality. The reality is that your child is not going to be able to get up and go to the bathroom independently without some sort of assistance. Our method of choice was that our child would call us in. Our cutie would say, I need to go to the bathroom, and we would come in and take her to the bathroom and then bring her back. That meant I didn't have to undo the whole system at all, right? We would just literally put her on the bathroom and then bring her back. So that's what worked best for our cutie. I also think that it's okay if you have to be in pull-ups for longer. There's no, to be frank, your child is going through medical treatment. And if there needs to be an adjustment in your expectations about what potty training looks like, that's okay. And to give yourself and your child grace in that situation as well. They're not going to be in pull-ups forever, and they're not going to be in Boots and Bar forever. And so I think it's just kind of working with your child to create the best routine that's possible. I think for us also, just from a parent ease point, we didn't wear a lot of zip up jammies, right? Even if we cut the feet off, because that meant if she had to go to the bathroom, that meant we were pulling the entire jammy down in order to do that. So it was strictly pants and shirts for pajama time. We also did a sleep sack for years. And so that was another hindrance. It was good for her, not for access to the boots, but then it was another thing that we had to do when we were potty training. But I think it's all just trying to figure out the best routine for you and your family. So I mean, to be real with you guys, my cutie is now out of Boots and Bar, and it's kind of annoying that she can get up and go to the bathroom by herself, because it's in the middle of, it's 5 a.m. She's oh, let's go to the bathroom. And I'm oh man, I don't have a deterrent anymore. You're just up and out of your bed so quickly. So in hindsight, it was kind of nice that she had to call me in. And now she has more independence. And I don't know if that's a positive thing or not. So yeah, I think it's just working with within your family system to find what works for you and your child.
Thank you for that. That will help me answer that question when it comes to me, because I honestly had never had that question posed to me. And it's so true that you don't think about that when they're 3 months old. When you're 3 years old and I'm just replacing boots at that time, you guys have it down. But that's something I can now interject into my discussion with families as they're picking up their next boots is oh, and have you started potty training? I learned these great tips from Maureen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just speaks to the longevity of clubfoot treatment and the fact
Absolutely.
that it goes from such a young age all the way through early childhood development. There's such a long period of time, and a lot happens. A lot of milestones happen during that time frame, and we're not thinking about all of those. And I would honestly caution parents from even thinking about that at 3 months old. You think about the stage that you're in at the moment that you're in, and then you go from that, from where you are to the next step, as opposed to really worrying so far into the future about what's going to happen. Taking it, one step at a time. This is another question that parents ask a lot is could a baby carrier be used when a baby is in Boots and Bar? Do you guys recommend that? Do you have certain carriers that you guys like? Is there specific positioning that you think? What do you guys say to parents? We'll start with you, Ksenia.
Yeah, so I love this one. And I say, one, try any carrier that you're interested in.
Okay.
We've had several different styles work well. So when your babe is real small between that 0 to 3 month phase, there's carriers like the Tula
Mhm.
that has a little infant insert that sits in the bottom. So their legs actually don't hang out yet at that stage. So they're kind of nice and curled up in there. And they can have the boots and bar on while they're in that carrier. As they get bigger, you can try any of those Ergo babies or the Baby Bjorn style that has the leg opening. Just try and put it on with the bar unattached. And so
Mhm.
once you get the legs with the boots on through the leg openings, whether it's forward facing, rear facing, then attach the bar. Some are a little more comfortable than others. There's so many styles out there now that really, again, suggest just trying them and see which one works best for you guys.
Yeah, slings also work too. So rather than having to deal with a harness, slings do work. It's just a matter of maneuvering that bar in the most comfortable position for you, because it is not soft by any means. But you can add, I'm sure many of you guys have seen like the little pool noodles cut in half and put over the bar just to kind of keep it softer. That's something that can be done if you are doing a sling. But back to the point at the very beginning when we talked about the boots don't work without the bar. You can
Mhm.
do all these things, but you have to have the bar. So it's just really, really important that you continue to do the boots and bars in combination to get the most effective use of the treatment.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's such a great point.
I circle it back to the socks again. Like, we love hearing from parents and even seeing pictures of their kiddo in the carriers. So
Mhm.
then we can let other parents know, and even share that visual, if that other parent is okay, it's nice
Mhm.
for them to be able to see, oh, they did get it on with the boot and bar. It can work.
Yeah,
It helps them narrow down that search process.
absolutely.
So maybe they're just focusing on picking the coolest pattern.
Yeah. Right, the most comfort fit. But I mean, it does add, it's a different development. It's just a whole different piece with that boots and bar attached because it does impact the way that it fits. So, finding different alternatives and working in different modifications within the baby carriers, I think is helpful too. And yeah, pictures are so great because parents look and they're like, I have no idea. I remember trying to get my cutie in which by the way, she hated the carrier, which was a nightmare for us. My second one loved it. And I like wore her all the time, but she just couldn't stand it. So I don't attribute that to the boots and bar. I attribute that to her personality. But I think I remember trying to get her in it and I was just like, I have no idea if this is right. So those visuals really help. So if you are a parent who's had success with that, sharing that with your medical team can be really helpful for other parents that are in that clinic too.
So we are at an hour right now. I have 2 more questions that I'll ask. The first one is to all 3 of you, but mainly Maureen, I would say, is what does life look like after boot and bar? And for Shannon and Ksenia, I think if you could even speak to if there's families that have talked to you, after their treatment and how you've kind of celebrated that with them. But go ahead, Maureen.
I think we're fresh into it, right? She's been out of her boots and bar, I think, for like 3 months now. So it's an adjustment. Honestly, it's a little bit like you go from an active caregiver to kind of watching, and your role kind of shifts a little bit. And I think a lot of cuties need adjustment times when they are graduating from their boots and bar. You have to remember, like, if you've done your job as you've done a good job of making this a sleep association, it's a sleep association for them. And for them to go, oh, I don't have to wear this anymore, there may be some resistance, even though you're so excited and they're excited, even there is So just knowing that and acknowledging that and talking through that with your cutie, because usually they're within that 4 to 5. So developmentally, they're going to have more understanding of what that means. And for us, it really just means we're continuing to do stretching. We're continuing to have hands on feet every day. We're still looking at a lot of stretching through play to make sure we're watching that flexibility and mobility. And we're still doing follow-ups. Like we're following up frequently, I'd probably say every 3 to 4 months with our medical team, just so that we're watching, especially after we are discontinuing this boots and bar after she's graduated. So for us, we're kind of fresh into it, but that's what our life has kind of looked like at this point, other than her getting up a million times in the middle of the night, which has also been an adjustment period for us. So I think just like anything, when you take something out of a routine, because boots and bar is so much of a routine. If you have set up that routine and then you're changing it, there is going to be time that is going to need adjustment for that, for everybody in the family, not just for your cutie. What do you think, Shannon?
I'm in agreement. It's associated with a routine. And unfortunately, there is a little bit of a transition that needs to occur. And if that means, every other night just for a week or so, but just it is something our 4-year-olds, our 5-year-olds are smart enough to know that this is a part of my routine. And unfortunately, it's gone. Again, it's a celebratory moment, but they associate it with, okay, I get these on and go to bed. So yeah, that's what I hear from families, is like a little bit of sleep regression right at the end, even though, again, you're so excited, but also like, oh, I didn't think of that to come. And then some kids do great with it. I think from our standpoint, we are orthotists, and so we want to make sure that we did our best. So relying upon our physicians to say, okay, how long do we need to be in treatment, and then celebrating that last moment when they are released from treatment. Nothing we decide, something that the physician decides, but getting to celebrate that with the families through their journey is always super special. But there is some forms of regression, whether your cutie has an associated diagnoses such as spina bifida or arthrogryposis. Those are pretty common congenital conditions that might also have clubfoot. So just being sure and being mindful that they're in the proper device after they graduated from boots and bars, if they do need that intervention from a different type of orthosis.
That's a great point, Shannon, that is part of our population that we see as orthotists. On the other side, sometimes we're a little sad that we don't get to necessarily celebrate with our ones that pick up their last pair of boots and we don't see them again. And that's because you guys did all the hard work of putting in that time every day, putting on the boots for the one main goal of all of us involved, and that was to prevent regression. And the recurrence of club feet. So yeah, I wish we got to celebrate more often with the families.
Yeah, definitely. Well, maybe more to come on that. This has been great, and I can't thank Shannon and Ksenia enough for being a part of this. This is our first one. Hopefully everyone has enjoyed this. We are going to have more. We are going to send a feedback survey out. We really, really do read all of those. We appreciate that feedback, and then we can continue these and make them better and better. I have one more question, but I wanted to get through some of the thank yous. Maureen's become a true friend of mine, and so she knows how appreciative I am that she's here. Again, Justin Fletcher behind the camera, working all the electronics. I don't know how he did this, but it worked out really well, and it's gone well. This question that I'm going to ask, all three of you can answer it, because it's an interesting question, but really what it gets into for me is where we're going to take these stepping forward events. And I think this is one direction that we'll go, and we'll probably re-answer this question in a future event similar to this. But the question is, Could you please give us some examples of what we can say to other people that notice our cuties' casts or boots and bar? And I think that touches everyone on how important this treatment is, but B, what do you say, or how do you address that?
I'm gonna start with you guys, Shannon and Ksenia. Do your parents ask you this? What do you say when parents bring this up to you, or do they talk to you about it?
They do definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. No,
No,
Ksenia, go.
you're good. You're good. I think it's such a common question that comes up all the time. Just again, as orthotists, we're putting on this physical device that everybody can see. And pediatrics is unique because it's usually brightly colored, so it's standing out. And we had one parent just put it so simply, as a matter to include everybody, you know, raise the awareness of inclusion. And they said, just say hi. Most parents are okay with getting questions. It's the staring, I think, that causes the most sensitivity. So she said, just say hi, and then we're happy to chat.
Mhm.
Yeah, my go-to is just become the educator. So you are living the clubfoot journey, so you can really educate society in and around clubfoot. You can go as detailed as you want to, or you can just kind of sugarcoat it and be like, hey, they're just wearing this for fun, you know, like you can just say whatever. But I think it's you become an educator for the everyone else surrounding you, and bringing awareness to what clubfoot is, how hard it is in this treatment journey. And really it allows you to just give yourself lots of kudos, because you are doing it, and it is it's a process for sure.
Great, Maureen.
Maureen, how about you? What did you ever say?
I think I tell parents that in hindsight, I wish I would have thought that through prior to entering into the world. We didn't really experience a lot with the casting, but with 23-hour wear, and we were out and about. I mean, she has 2 older siblings. And so, and of course it was summertime. So we were out doing a lot. And I wish I would have kind of just thought and to be prepared when that situation arises. So I always tell parents, like, think about what it is that you want to say. And sometimes like you're just not in the mood. Like I got 3 kids and they're melting down and you're staring at my cutie and wanting to ask me, and I don't feel like being an educator at that point.
Sure.
And sometimes I just go, you know, this is what my daughter's has to wear for her treatment. It can be as simple as whatever you need to say about it. But I really am also a believer in just bringing forth that clubfoot awareness, right? It is now you kind of become ambassadors of it. And a lot of the time it's really positive what people say. They're like, oh yeah, this is my, you know, I know so-and-so, or this person had that. Or if you think about it, clubfoot being so prevalent, there are so many people that you will run into who have experience with it. And so if you kind of think of their questions or their stares or their things as something more inquisitive than judgmental, that helped me in framing the way that I was going to answer those questions. But I think Ksenia was right. It's like the staring that seems to be the biggest issue. And so saying like, do you have a question about it? Especially like little kids were the best. Little kids are like, why is she wearing that? Right. And then I was able to say, oh, this is why. And they're like, well, why does she have to wear it? And then I would constantly use the kind of the bracing, like dental bracing, because that was something that people automatically could have a reference to, a point of reference of like, you know, she wore these casts, and that was like the braces. And then this is like the retainer to keep them in the right place so that it was an easy thing that everyone could kind of reference. But I think it's just maybe taking that thought process prior to entering into the boots and bar phase to think about how do you want to address those questions? Yeah.
Thanks for your
And
honesty, Maureen, too, because like you said, some days you're just not going to feel up to it. And I think being okay with that,
Mm,
I just don't feel like answering that today and moving on is totally
Right.
fine.
yeah. And I just think that I want to thank everybody so much for being a part of it. I was super excited to be here with MD Orthopedics and with Shannon and Ksenia and Jeff, and just, I love doing things for parents because I really am a firm believer that parents really are on the front line of clubfoot treatment at home. And we genuinely want this to be something that is informative and helpful to you. And so you are going to get a survey. We want you to give feedback because we really do want to continue these kind of series of webinars and events for you guys. So please give us feedback on whether it was helpful or things that you would have liked to have differently, because it really will make an impact on how we coordinate these moving forward. But I just wanted to give a huge thank you to everybody, because I would have loved something like this when my cutie was in 23-hour wear. So it's the hope that we are helping parents in the future for all of this. So thank you all for participating, and a huge thank you to Shannon and Ksenia for being here and sharing all of that information. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, again, thank you, everyone. From the bottom of our hearts, this was great. Look for more of these in the future here, and we'll definitely get more information out on our socials, emails. And the last thing I want to say is, if you have questions, especially around the device that we are supplying to you, please call us. We have a very compassionate group of people that work at our office. Our office is in Wayland, Iowa. It's in the heart of America, small town. And it means a lot to us and everyone that works there. So feel free to call us at any point. But thank you so much, and look forward to doing this again soon.